Spoiler warning up to and including chapter 1103 of the manga. It's a new year, but we are still suffering from the residual pain left over from the most recent backstory in the One Piece manga. We've gotten Oda's message for what is there to look forward to in the future, but first we must get past Egghead, and in Egghead it has come to light that Bartholomew Kuma is undeniably one of the, if not the greatest fathers in the history of history. And with the release of chapter 1103, Kuma has arrived on Egghead Island, and just look at this. Pictures speak 1,000 words, but forget that. This picture is screaming millions of words. So this video will be a retelling of the story of Bartholomew Kuma so far, going over everything he has done in the story in chronological order, meaning we will begin with his flashback, make our way through his life, through the main story of One Piece, and end back at the Egghead arc and chapter 1103, just to really put into perspective how much this character alone has impacted the world of One Piece, and please do let me know if I happen to miss anything. Starting with his birth, Bartholomew Kuma was born to an unnamed human mother and father Clap, who was a member of the Buccaneer race, but almost instantly he and his parents were enslaved by the world government, and Kuma specifically being put to slave labor at the age of 4, with the dialogue suggesting that the Buccaneer race has long been enemies of the world government. And look at the smile in this panel. He has no idea of the situation he is in, and then take a look at his parents, specifically his father next to him. This is the most horrifying situation to be in, but they still tried to spare his innocence. But that doesn't last long, because in the next few panels we can see Kuma being put to labor, being hit, and we can put together that he and his parents were separated while working, as his dad approaches and talks with Kuma to first put him even the slightest bit at ease before breaking the news that his mother had passed. And neither Clap nor Kuma could keep themselves together any longer, and again, in the effort of sparing Kuma the darkness of reality, the warrior of liberation is brought up, the sun god Nika. His father tells the story, dances to the beat of the drums of liberation before being shot right in front of Kuma, who hasn't even registered what just happened. Now skip forward to where Kuma is 9 years old and the Celestial Dragons are hosting a native hunting competition on the island of God Valley, where the natives are hunted for sport and Kuma along with other slaves are thrown into the mix. Having attempted to escape, Kuma is beaten by the other slaves out of their very own real fear of being punished due to Kuma's actions, and 2 other slaves introduce themselves. Ginny and her big brother Ivankov, who has a giant head. And speaking of giants, Ivankov makes a statement that as a buccaneer, Kuma has giant blood in him, and loudly proclaims that he wants to live. Looking to escape the island, Kuma and his newfound friends form a plan to obtain 2 devil fruits on the island, the prizes of the native hunt, one that allows the user to transform into an azure dragon, and the pawpaw fruit. Kuma offers himself up as a decoy with very sad imagery to go along with it, as he and presumably all of the other slaves and natives have a target drawn on their backs, and his kindness shines through, as his reasoning is because he doesn't want to see anyone else die from this. He and Ivankov do obtain the devil fruits, but not before Ivankov's is stolen, which would branch off into a wild and sprawling story of its own, and Kuma eats his. And the orchestrator, Saint J. Garcia Saturn, appears, talks about the Buccaneer race, and Kuma stands his ground and says that he wants to save people, just like Nika. He does manage to get away from Saturn and escape the island, but we don't know how. My best guess is that the fighting on God Valley made its way to their location, and Kuma was able to sneak away amidst the chaos. Kuma, Ginny and Ivankov make their way to Kuma's home, a church in the Sorbet Kingdom. So this could imply that Nika was worshipped a long time ago, and Kuma's Bible, while possibly being of his own making, could also possibly contain information on the past as religious text on Nika himself. Ivankov leaves, But Ginny stays behind with Kuma as they begin a new chapter of their lives. After another 8-year jump, Kuma is working as a pastor and relieving the elderly citizens in Sorbet of their pain each Sunday, and each time he takes that pain onto himself, otherwise it would just return to those citizens. This leaves Ginny in a position where she must take care of him, as she can just watch as he puts himself through the ordeal. 5 more years forward, Kuma is hesitant to marry Ginny because he knows of what mere affiliation with a buccaneer did to his family, and he does not want to put anyone else he loves through that. But he learns of Dragon, leader of the then called freedom fighters, and this lights a small spark in Kuma. And when he is 25, he rebels against the cruel king of Sorbet who wanted to cut off the southern side of the island. And as Kuma lamented the state of his home island, Ivankov returns alongside Dragon, liberating the country and recruiting Ginny and Kuma into the freedom fighters, which would grow into the Revolutionary Army, which they would stay a part of for the next 8 years together, with Kuma and everyone working in different squadrons. But Ginny would be captured and taken to Marijois to be wed to a celestial dragon. Now having the person closest to him taken away, Kuma is no longer the cheerful man he once was, acting recklessly. But 2 years after the kidnapping, Kuma and the Revolutionary Army would receive a call from none other than Ginny herself, now with a child, her daughter Bonnie. She had been discarded by the celestial dragons after she got sick and was in no state to travel, and this sickness would eventually lead to her death, as she sacrificed her remaining life to get Bonnie safely to the church in Sorbet, and her last words telling Kuma that she loves him, which he did not hear as he rushed back home to see her. Her skin turned blue and hardened to stone after exposure to light. Kuma took Bonnie in his arms and swore that he would raise her well, and we see a montage of his struggles of raising Bonnie and fighting for the Revolutionary Army. And it is also during this time that Sabo would be taken in by the Revs after the burning of Grey Terminal. But soon, Bonnie would develop the same disease that took her mother, and Kuma would leave the revolutionaries to look after her. Now Bonnie, at 5 years old, is a very tough kid, but she would spend all of her time in the church as to not be exposed to light, and becoming insecure of the stones on her face, Kuma would comfort her by calling them her jewels. And then comes the infamous line, "If you could go on a trip, where would you like to go?" As they plan a grand adventure, the disease is identified as Sapphire Scale, and we learn that she only has another 5 years left to live before even her 10th birthday. Bonnie, overhearing this, misinterprets it to mean that she will be cured by age 10, and Kuma is forced into a position where he must lie to her to protect her. The former King Bikori then returns and attempts to burn the southern part of the island, inspired by the Goa Kingdom, but Kuma alone puts a stop to it in an event called the One-Man Revolution. And by popular demand, Kuma became the new king of the Sorbet Kingdom, although the country would really be run by Bulldog, the king before Bikori. Bonnie would suddenly learn that she has the abilities of the Age fruit, and Bikori would try one more time to reclaim the kingdom, which also failed as Kuma left in search of a cure, leaving Bonnie in the care of Bulldog and his mother Connie. He would go from island to island across the world in his search, islands that we would become very familiar with in the future, and he would even catch up with the dragon and his old comrades, giving his blessing for Belobetti to take over Ginny's old position. And Dragon would tell Kuma about visiting a certain Dr. Vegapunk to cure Bonnie. He would carry her around in a wooden box, and upon meeting, Vegapunk said that he could cure her. And when he learns of Kuma's blood, he tells of the Clone Soldier project and suggests Kuma be the subject as payment for curing Bonnie. Remember, Vegapunk hasn't split himself up yet, and his only loyalty is to the advancement of science and tech. Vegapunk calls Kuma a saint, who replies by saying he's nothing more but a pacifist, giving rise to the name pacifista. Sadly, Saturn adds 3 stipulations to Kuma and Vegapunk's deal. 1. Kuma must become one of the 7 warlords of the sea. 2. He must become a human weapon for the Navy. And 3. He must give up his free will and individuality. And overcome with emotions, Kuma wholeheartedly agrees, as he thinks purely about the fact that Bonnie would be cured. But Saturn adds one more caveat. Bonnie will be kept under government supervision until Kuma's personality is completely erased to ensure compliance, and Kuma's only request being to keep Bonnie in the church on Sobe and to never tell her the truth. And so both Kuma and Ginny stay on the island, which would become Egghead, as they both undergo their procedures, and during this time Kuma would give Vegapunk permission to study his memories. And when they finally return home, Cypher Pole Agent Alpha shows up to take care of Bonnie. Kuma thanks his daughter and expresses his joy for her being born, and leaves. He gains notoriety as a warlord while having Bonnie's drawing as his Jolly Roger, and he finds himself at Windmill Village in the East Blue. Here, Kuma watches on as Luffy trains himself, preparing to head out to sea in the next couple of years. But this isn't the first time Kuma has seen Luffy, because this leads Kuma to reminisce on something Dragon had told him when they had previously visited the Goa Kingdom during the burning of Grey Terminal. A child is a parent's weakness, and Kuma knows all too well of the weight that statement truly holds. As his journey continues, Kuma continuously writes to Bonnie, keeping her updated on his travels, but back in Sobe, Bonnie is no longer receiving those letters. The Cypher Pole Agent Alpha is intercepting and shredding them. Even when Kuma thinks things are getting better for Bonnie, there's always something in the way. Even when on the operating table, he continues to write, wishing her a happy birthday, and she celebrates back home, but the celebrations are soured as Bonnie doesn't receive the message. Kuma's efforts continue, sending letters and aiding the Revolutionary Army, all while Bonnie is cured, and with the help of Granny Connie and the others, she is able to step out into the sun and set sail in search of her father. More time passes and Bonnie's search for her father rages on as she gains notoriety as a pirate. Kuma, a man of his word, continuously evades her efforts, even though he too wishes to see her. But he does actively keep up with Luffy's exploits. And now we are well into the time frame of the main story of One Piece. In the Jaya arc, we see Kuma attend a meeting of the 7 warlords of the sea after Crocodile's defeat, and this is where Lafitte suggests Blackbeard as the replacement. Back to Egghead, Kuma looks upon the pacifistas and tells Vegapunk that Luffy is the son of Dragon, since Vegapunk will study his memories anyway. And he ponders over the similarities the son of Dragon shares with his idol Nika. Then, to Thriller Bark, upon arriving, Kuma asks Perona where she would like to go on a trip and sends her away. This is the first time us as the audience sees him in action, and he cuts a very imposing figure. And my headcanon is that he did this so Perona would not get caught up in the mayhem to come. Anyway, Kuma notifies Gecko Moria of Blackbeard's addition to the 7 warlords and witnesses his defeat at the hands of the Straw Hats. Kuma is then ordered to step in himself, but when he saw the loyalty that the crew showed for Luffy, he compromised with Zoro to take all of Luffy's pain, which he said would even knock him unconscious possibly, and after that, nothing happened, leaving Kuma impressed by the Son of Dragon and his friends. Next, Sabaody Archipelago. Kuma was notified of the upcoming war with the Whitebeard pirates over Port Casti Ace, and knowing that the time was nearing where his free will would be taken, he watched Bonnie and smiled one more time. He also witnessed the aftermath of Luffy punching a celestial dragon, noting the severity and rarity of the action. Next, arguably the most important moment in the story. Kuma saved the Straw Hats. He told Rayleigh that he is with the Revolutionary Army and sent each member of the crew to an island so they could grow because they were not ready for the new world, and that Luffy would one day save the world. Back on Egghead, Saturn made Vegapunk install a self-destruct device in Kuma as insurance, and it is clear to see the paranoia from Saturn adding all of these things to the deal. And this is now the day where Kuma loses his individuality. This is also where he asks to be programmed to protect the Thousand Sunny, inspired by Luffy and hedging his bets on him, the hero who will change the seas. He gives Vegapunk a copy of his memories and wonders how his actions had hurt people. And we see, in my opinion, the greatest page of the year. Kuma's life, and Vegapunk breaks down. His death will pain everyone. Kuma is a hero to everyone, as everyone prays and salutes. He asks Vegapunk to wish Bonnie a happy 10th birthday, and in a sense, what reawakens is no longer Bartholomew Kuma. He takes part in the Marineford War, now a slave of the world government, and he no longer recognizes Ivankov, one of his oldest friends. He followed through with protecting the Straw Hat ship, and we will skip to the Reverie, where Kuma is now once again a slave to the Celestial Dragons, forced to hold down Shirahoshi for them, but was saved and taken away when the Revolutionary Army invaded Marijua. And now finally we have returned to the Egghead arc. Dragon asked Kuma about Marijua, to which he robotically replied, and he would then begin running, leaving the island to everyone's shock. He crashed into and began climbing the Red Line, was bombarded with attacks, and when he reached the top and reached the Holy Land, he was confronted by the Fleet Admiral Akainu. And after a brief but painful fight, he once again sent himself away. And finally, as of chapter 1103, Bartholomew Kuma has arrived on Egghead to save his daughter from the one who caused all of this. This panel is filled with rage, and if that punch does not connect, we all riot. So now what? I don't know if the punch will land, but here is my theory. Kuma will regain his free will. A plot thread throughout the Egghead arc is the fact that a being's nature or will can't be taken away, be it with the weaponized sea beasts or even with the Seraphim, specifically S-Snake, who is charmed by Luffy just like the real Hancock, and S-Hawk, who Zoro says has more humanity than the real Mihawk. And these are clones, so the real Bartholomew Kuma will regain his humanity. But unfortunately, I also think he will die in the end. Saturn's self-destruct device. Kuma will regain his free will completely, and this will cause Saturn to set off the self-destruct device. But not before he is able to see Nika, see Luffy laughing, hear the drums playing. His bets paid off. He will also see Bonnie, and I think that before his time ends, he will make sure that she is safe. And so, that was his story so far, as well as how I believe we will close the book on his torturous, joyous, heartbreaking, blood-pumping, rage-inducing, tear-jerking, one-of-a-kind, masterfully written story of one Bartholomew Kuma.